Hi everybody, this is Professor Johnson. This video is to provide a brief introduction to some team tools related to trust. As we get started with our marketing research project, we're doing a couple of things to help ensure a strong foundation for our project teams. First is we selected teams using the CATME system based on the variables that you saw as you went into the system and entered your data. Now we're providing you with some tools and some basic concepts and models to consider as your team begins to work together. So this brief video will introduce specifically some models and concepts related to team trust and building team trust. This model here is provided by Patrick Lencioni. He is a consultant that works in industry quite a bit. He's developed this model for high-performing teams. You can see there's 5 elements here. It starts on the bottom with building and exhibiting trust. So the high-performing team is built on this element here, this variable. Teams that build and exhibit trust are able to engage in healthy conflict. And this conflict is, I suppose I could put this in quotation marks here. Really, this is, you might also label this engage in healthy disagreement. So a team that trusts one another is willing to engage in conflict with one another. They're willing to disagree with one another. They're willing to have healthy conversation about concepts and issues and figures with which they disagree. And they're not afraid of hurting one another. And that's because they trust each other and they believe that each team member has the best interests of the others in mind. In fact, here's our definition of trust. So trust in our conversation here is going to be defined this way. That trust is the confidence among team members that their peers' intentions are good and that there is no reason to be protective or careful around the group. So you can see a team that trusts each other this way is going to be willing to engage in healthy conflict. The team that's willing to engage in healthy conflict and disagreement is also willing to commit to the team. So team members are going to demonstrate commitment. If they're willing to demonstrate commitment, they're going to be willing to be accountable for the work of the team as a whole and also individually accountable for their contributions. And finally, if the team members are willing to be accountable, they're going to deliver superior results. So these are the characteristics of a high-performing team. When a team doesn't trust, does not exhibit trust, or has an absence of trust, it turns all of these elements from elements of a high-performing team or characteristics of a high-performing team into the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Trust is still defined the same way, but if you have an absence of trust, there's an absence of this confidence among team members, then this results in a fear of conflict or a fear of disagreement among team members. They're not willing to disagree with one another because they don't trust each other. If there's a fear of conflict, this is going to result in a lack of commitment. People are not going to be willing to commit to the work of the team. This means that they're going to avoid accountability for the overall work of the team as well as their individual components of that work. And finally, they're not going to be paying attention to the results and are consequently going to deliver less than quality work at the end of the day. These are some evidences of each of these 5 dysfunctions. So if there's an absence of trust in the team, an evidence of that is going to be lack of vulnerability. This lack of vulnerability is going to look like people are not willing to share information about themselves with one another. They're not going to be willing to put themselves out on the line for the team. If there's an absence of trust, that's going to result in a fear of conflict. That fear of conflict or disagreement is going to look like artificial harmony, that there's never a disagreement. Everybody always agrees with each other. If you find that happening in your team, it's probably not the case that you don't have any areas upon which to disagree. Or to state it in the affirmative, you probably do have areas on which you each can disagree, or some of you can disagree. But because you don't trust each other, because there's a lack of vulnerability, you're going to have that artificial harmony. If you have artificial harmony, things are probably going to be ambiguous. People's roles are not going to be clear. The work you need to do is not going to be clear. Who's responsible for what is not going to be clear, which means that folks are going to be avoiding being accountable for the work. And finally, the individual status and personal ego is going to be more important than the output and the work of the team. These are all really useful things to watch for as you put your team together. Every team will begin with an absence of trust and a lack of vulnerability. The challenge is to build trust so you can turn these 5 dysfunctions into the characteristics of a high-performing team. So let's look at what are the elements of trust. How do you build trust? This is a really useful equation or model for thinking about how we build trust. And you can see there's 4 components or 4 variables here involved in trust, building trust. Credibility, reliability, authenticity, and self-orientation. Here's our abbreviation of the trust equation. And now let's look at the definitions of each of these variables. So trustworthiness can be defined this way, and we see the definition of trust that we saw earlier in the Lencioni model embedded here in this definition. So trustworthiness, a teammate who is trustworthy is seen by others on the team as having the best interest of the team at heart. Team members feel no need to be protective or careful around trustworthy teammates. And you can all probably think of people who have exhibited this, people who have had the best interests of the team at heart and whom you've felt no need to be protective or careful around. Credibility. Here's how we define credibility. A credible teammate is honest and competent. She or he tells the truth, does complete high-quality work, and makes informed contributions based on his or her study. In other words, they know what they're talking about. That's what an informed contribution means. So that's a credible teammate. Take a moment to think about somebody in an acquaintance of yours, a friend of yours, a former teammate, or maybe a current teammate of yours who has been credible. They tell the truth, they do complete work, and they make informed contributions. Reliability is defined this way. A reliable teammate is one who is dependable and can be trusted to behave in consistent ways that benefit the team. She or he holds her or himself accountable for contributing to the team and getting his or her work done on time. That's a reliable teammate. They're dependable, they're consistent in how they behave, they hold themselves accountable for getting the work done on time and contributing to the team. An authentic teammate is one who is self-reflective. She or he understands her or his own personal experiences and their resulting values, emotion, thoughts, and beliefs, and act in accordance with those values and beliefs. For example, they express what they really think, and they act on those beliefs. So this combination of credibility, reliability, and authenticity are the first 3 variables in developing and exhibiting personal trustworthiness. However, the value of all of those added together, even if all those is really high, that can be severely diminished by our denominator here, which is self-orientation. A self-oriented team, a teammate with low self-orientation puts the team's interests before their own. Can you think of a teammate you've had like that before? They always put the team's interests before their own. She or he makes decisions based on the team's best interests. A teammate with high self-orientation makes decisions based on what is personally best for her or him without considering the impact on the team. Clearly, if we have a teammate with high self-orientation, if this denominator is a high value, that's going to result in a low level of trustworthiness. If the denominator is low, That's going to result in a high level of trustworthiness. So this is what we see then. If we put our high characteristics of a high-performing team together with our trustworthiness or trust equation. How do we build and exhibit trust? We build it by exhibiting credibility, reliability, and authenticity, and a low order of self-orientation. So as we get our teams, as we kick off our marketing research project teams, what will you do today to begin building trust with your teammates? That becomes our critical question. And as a follow-on, what will you do to continue to support and build that trust throughout the project's life, all throughout this semester? So I encourage you to think about that as we kick off our project teams. We have more work to do, and we'll introduce additional tools going forward, and we'll even introduce a trustworthiness self-assessment so you can monitor yourself on how you're doing with that. I look forward to working with you on your project teams and talking more about how we can ensure you're being successful throughout the semester.